Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Holly again. It looks like we've got a lot of people are still joining, so I'm just going to give it like one more minute here. Assuming you can still hear me. So I will move forward in just about a minute. There's a bunch of people, yes. Okay, good. I'm seeing yes. Okay, I think we're ready to get started here. So welcome to our second cost center manager briefing. Hopefully you were able to join the first one. If not, we did record it, and that is out on our enterprise project website. So you can definitely go out and enjoy that if you didn't participate in the first one. So we are going to go ahead and move into a more specific topic today. I did want to remind everyone, and I said this in the last one, that you've been selected to kind of be part of these monthly meetings because there's potential that you may get the cost center manager role in future state. Right now, your college's VP units, and some of you may be involved in this, are working through all those security assignments, and we won't really know until March exactly who will have those security roles. But based off of your current role, where you all do some sort of physical activity, I think no matter what, this should be very beneficial. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the first slide here. So just as a reminder that this session is a one-way audio. So if you have questions as we're going, feel free to put those in the chat. We will probably try to stop on those, not as immediately as we're going, but as we finish the section, we'll stop and see what questions have been typed in and ask for other questions at that point. If we don't get to everything, we will definitely do an FAQ afterwards. This session is being recorded and will be made available to participants and those unable to attend. Our intent today is to review again some of the responsibilities that you would have by fulfilling the cost center manager security role in Workday. This is not meant to be formal training. There'll be much more of that coming in the later springtime where we'll have formal training. So our agenda today, talk about purpose and cadence for these meetings. I'm going to go over some terminology changes between current state and future state. Talk about what our payment options are when we in Workday. And then we're going to review the requisition workflow. Probably some of you have seen this at a higher level. We're trying to dig in a little bit deeper today to show you that workflow. And then we're going to do, Jamie Claypool is here with me, and we're going to do she will do a requisition demo, particularly focused on the approval piece when you're the cost center manager, how that will look. And then we're also going to I will talk a little bit about the supplier invoice request process within Workday and the process flow. And then again, we'll have Jamie, hand it over to Jamie, and she'll do a demo of that in Workday. And then depending on time, we will have some open time there for Q&A at the end. Okay, but again, if you have questions as I'm going, feel free to type them in and we'll try to get to them as we're going. So purpose for today, why are we doing this? So again, we talked about this last time, but just to kind of reiterate, the cost center manager security role is I'd say the most widely used security role across our business processes within Workday. It's in a lot of places within our processes due to the need for somebody to approve transactions for a budget appropriateness perspective. So we want to do everything we can to start to prepare you ahead of time for what that role will entail. So today, our goal today is to highlight the requisition workflow and the supplier invoice request, and again, try to kind of pinpoint places where the cost center manager would be involved in those. And then each month, we're planning to highlight key business processes. And so we'll maybe move to the next slide, where we're looking at in February, our next one that we're looking to focus on is going to be travel and expense. So just to put that out there, that's something to hopefully get you excited about, that you're going to see more around travel and expense in February. And that date should be out on your calendar. I think it is February 19th. So that should be in your calendar. Just confirming folks can still hear me, because it looks like there's somebody who's having trouble hearing me. Can a couple people type in to say they can still hear me? Okay. Looks like maybe it's a specific, cool, awesome. Okay, looks like it's just maybe a specific single problem. Okay, so we'll try to see what, hopefully we can get that resolved. So again, these sessions, we're gonna do these at least up through, you know, we're saying maybe April, May. We'll see about June, but definitely want to lead into where you'll be doing the more formal training. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So again, some of you may have heard some of these, but just to reiterate, and I do get hear a lot of questions about these. So the current state term for some of these versus the workday equivalent, just to kind of level set. So in current state, we might call it, we would call it maybe a travel request. This is the pre-travel request that you might do in e-travel. In future state, in workday terms, that's called a spend authorization. In current terms, we might say a reimbursement request. Again, this one might be something you're going to process in e-travel, e-request today. In workday terminology, we call that an expense report. That expense report could be for travel or non-travel. So just a regular reimbursement versus a travel reimbursement. In current state, we typically will say e-request, e-stores. If we're buying something maybe from the shopping cart or from a shopping cart catalog experience. In future state, the word we're going to be using more is marketplace. So that's kind of that online shopping experience. Current state, we might say e-request, or at least e-request would be where we would initiate a request for something to purchase something that might not be on catalog. In future state, so non-marketplace purchases, we're going to call a non-catalog request. Current state, we typically say vendor. So we're setting up a vendor for payment that we want to be able to issue POs against. In Workday, we will call that a supplier. And then finally, current state, we might say payment request, prep, convenience order. Future state, those are going to be handled through a couple different ways. One is supplier invoice request, which we'll talk about today. And the other is a process called a miscellaneous payment, which I'll touch on too. You also might hear when we say non-catalog request, you might also sometimes hear myself or others refer to that as a special request. But again, those are anything that's not done within the catalogs in the marketplace. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the payment options. So within Workday, really try to think about this as three main ways that we would make payments that aren't necessarily related to payroll, of course. So we have payments to suppliers. We have payments to individuals, which would typically be done through, if we're reimbursing, of course, we would be doing that through expense management. That's also where we'll do P-card payments and things like that. And then finally, we have miscellaneous payees. And this is where we don't have a supplier, but we still need to make a payment. So for example, a good example of one of these might be an honorarium, is an example of something in a miscellaneous payment. Today, we're going to focus on the purple here. We're going to focus on payments that we're making where we have an approved formal supplier set up in Workday. So that will be our focus for today. We will come back to expense management the next time, and then we'll talk about, hopefully we'll talk about miscellaneous payments and one of our other ones after that. Okay, so let's move on to the next slides. Supplier. Okay, so the requisition workflow. So I want to kind of talk through the difference between buying something and the approvals really that happen when you're buying something off the marketplace versus a non-catalog request. In all cases, all requests will start with a workday requisition. And for the campus side, the health system's a little different. But for the campus, all of our colleges, VP units, any employee with a name.n would be able to initiate a requisition, very similar to e-request today. And those requisitions will follow different paths depending on if the marketplace is used or not. And similar to today, if the purchase is done through the marketplace, which obviously is the preferred method whenever possible, when it's done through the marketplace, the approval process is typically much simpler. Because again, those are already approved, they're already approved pricing catalogs, and those can go out much quicker than potentially something that's done through a non-catalog request. And I know you all have, most of you probably today in your current roles are working with your folks on your units to try to continue to push them to wherever possible to use the marketplace or the catalogs versus doing a non-catalog request. So in terms of the flow, when the requisition, the person initiating the requisition chooses to go out to the marketplace, which we hope they'll do a majority of the time, the transaction will always go through the cost center manager. And the cost center manager should be reviewing from a budget perspective, university policy, and business purpose, appropriate business purpose, those things that would be the responsibility of the cost center manager. There are down below, there are a few, so if it does have a grants manager or a program project manager, if it has one of those work tags and it is, and your unit, your college UP unit has decided to assign a manager as a security role, these grants managers, program project manager, it would also touch on those for the marketplace. And then at that point, if it's not on an OSP grant, at that point the requisition will be auto-sourced to a PO and the purchase order will go out. So that's a difference from today. There is no touch point for a university service center on these transactions that go through the marketplace. On the non-catalog request, the cost center manager will also always receive these first, and they will go through and look at the purchase again. They can, and Jamie will show this, they can, and in both cases, the cost center manager can edit the FDM if that needs to be edited, along with things like business purpose or something like that. And then it will go to the business transaction services staff. So in these cases, the service center, whatever service center you currently flow through, or I know that a couple areas are still making some adjustments there, but it will go to that service center for to determine appropriate procurement method and to move that transaction along. There's a little asterisk there because again, if there is an OSP grant on this transaction, instead of going to the university service center that you typically would flow through, it will go to the grant shared services center. Which I know we touched on a little bit last time. In general, so that's a good, so I see the question actually about internal vendors, and that's a good question. Yes, so there will be, not all internal vendors today will be set up in the marketplace or as non-catalog requests, but a good portion of them, that is our goal, is that we will get them set up as basically you would take this flow that we're looking at, this requisition workflow, and it would also be used for internal orders, internal suppliers. And those internal vendors will be set up as internal suppliers in future state. That we can definitely put that on a future conversation because there's a lot of conversation that we could have about internal suppliers, but in general, some of them will follow this workflow and be more consistent with following the requisition process. And I will, since I'm on the slide, I will go ahead and answer Doris that yes, the cost center manager will be what Workday calls a review step. That means, and you don't want you to get confused with that term, the cost center manager is still approving the transaction, but they can also, at that point as they're approving it, they can also edit things such as the FDM. Okay, so then, again, so if it's a non-catalog request, it will always go through the 2 red boxes. It will go through the cost center manager and the service centers. And then these other ones that are in gray here are meant to represent kind of some optional steps that might occur depending on either the dollar amount of the transaction, the work tags on the transaction, or who the transaction is for. So we have, just kind of to go through touch on a few of them. We have the department leader / OAA or president. So we talked about this again a little bit last time. For the department leader, if a transaction if a requisition is greater than $2,500, or if it's $200 and higher and in a high risk category, so something like an entertainment expense or a business meal, that in those cases, again, always the cost center manager and the service center, but then the department leader would also have a step in the workflow. We're also working on if the person who the transaction is for, so if we can identify basically the person initiating the requisition, or for like a travel and expense, if that person in a travel expense is a dean or a VP, this probably applies more to the travel and expense, but it could happen on an OAA, on a requisition. We do have some logic built in where if it's for a dean or a VP, that the transaction will also automatically add in the office of the president or OAA into the workflow. Just to touch on a couple more of these. So the buyer, so there is still a role for the central buyer. And it's very similar to today. And at this point, we're planning to keep it at $5,000. So if the purchase is over $5,000, it will go for an additional step to central procurement for a buyer to review. And again, I've mentioned the grants manager, project program manager are, again, those optional ones that we've talked about that you may, college or VP unit may or may choose to assign people to those roles. Those would always come after the cost center manager. So that's kind of just touches on some of what's in these optional, some of these optional steps. So hopefully that helps. Definitely get a lot of questions on that. So let's see, do we want to maybe look at a couple more? Are there 2 levels of approvers? Supervisor, then area business office. So no, there aren't 2 levels of approvals in the standard process that we're showing here. So there is, on a requisition, there's always the cost center manager approval. So that's always in there. And then again, depending on the thresholds for the non-catalog request, it will also go to the department leader. Yes, if it's over the marketplace, if it's over 2,500, will not go to the department leader. Only the non-catalog request purchases. Hopefully that helps clear that up, and much more to come on that as we get into more of the training and the curriculum. So we are going to go ahead. So again, kind of emphasizing here where the cost center manager is in those process flows. And we're going to go ahead and transition to Jamie, who's going to go ahead and go through a example demo of a purchase requisition in Workday. And then maybe I'll come back to those questions in a minute, and we can try to keep track of those.
Thanks so much, Holly. I am getting myself back in the system here and looking like who I need to look like to show you the things that are of interest to you. As Holly said, my name is Jamie Claypool, and I am the change analyst at Supporting Supply Chain. And I'm going to try to show you what it would look like to approve a requisition from the cost center manager point of view. That's why you saw me take a moment there to get into Workday as a cost center manager. So I'm not totally sure if everyone's exposure to Workday at this point, so I will take a moment to back up and say when a cost center manager, that role is someone who will be in Workday on a regular basis, that you will have action items that will be asked of you fairly regularly. So whether you're in there every hour, you're in there once a day, that might vary.
Zoom your screen.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. What do you think? Better? All right. Thanks. So I say that because I want to point out to you some tools in your upper left-hand corner here on your toolbar. There are notifications that you can have sent to you that are nice to know bits of information, but nothing that you need to act on. And to contrast that, the approval of a requisition is an example of an action item that will go into your inbox. So that's where we'll start. I'm a cost center manager. I'm in my inbox, and that inbox has two sections to it. I have an Actions tab and an Archive tab. My Actions tab shows me things that are currently waiting for me to act upon them. My Archive tab will show me anything that I have acted on in the last 30 days. If I can't remember requisition number, who sent it to me, if I've acted on it in the last 30 days, I can go back through here and try to retrace my steps. Typically, you'll come to your Actions tab. Within here, you might have a number of different actionable items. You can use filtering to help you be able to drive your work. There are a number of different filters that you can set up, and you as the end user have the power to edit those filters as you best see fit. Let's say you might only want to see requisitions from one certain cost center, you can set that up. Let's say you need to see a swath of information, or someone's out today and you want to be able to pick up and act upon their things. At any point in time, you can create filters that you keep on a regular basis and use, and you can go and change and edit those filters as need be as well. So for example, one you might consider setting up, and of course, job aids will be available on how to be able to set up these kind of filters. So no need to feverishly write down everything I'm saying. But a requisition, filter that might be of interest to you to set up as a cost center manager would be a pending requisitions filter. And what that would do for us is it would get rid of all the other noise. I just want to focus in right now on my requisitions. I can sort them in a number of different ways as well. Newest, oldest, the things that are going to be due the most soon. From there, I can act on the requisition right from within my inbox. I can choose to open the requisition more fully and have a bigger view. But really, it's a matter of slowly going through the different bits of information at your disposal and looking for those kind of key data elements that you as a cost center manager are of most interest in, such as your fiscal and budgeting parameters. As well, we'll want to take a look at the shipping address. Where has the requester asked for this to be shipped to, and do we feel that that's the appropriate address? So from this view, we're able to slowly look at bits of information. Okay, well, Lauren was our requester here, and she didn't ship it to her house. All right, awesome. I'm okay with that then. Let's look at our information tab, see what kind of things she may have left for us here. Oh, she did leave us a business purpose, so that's a good idea. What she's requesting is for research and office supplies. You might want something more robust than that. You might have internal processes where you might request other things be added to this area, but for university users, that is going to be a required field to have a business purpose. From there, we can look at other information such as the date of their request. And we can also look at our goods lines or services lines, depending on what someone has requested at the time. We have a couple of different ways we can view this, that we can make it a full screen, or we can move right to left. From the cost center manager's perspective, you're looking at the budgetary responsibility and the addresses. So we already viewed our address, but as we go right to left, please let us look at that one more time for each individual item ordered. And as well, we can go take a look at our cost center, balancing unit, fund, and work tags. We can edit at this point as we see fit, keeping tags that may have defaulted in, and then adding tags that we might see fit. So let's say, for example, yeah, you know what, I do want that tag on there, but I also want to stick a program tag, whatever else I see fit to be able to add on there. And we can do that line by line. based on what the item is, based on who the requester is, whatever you as a cost center manager see fit. From there, once we've reviewed our lines, if we feel comfortable with what's being asked, where it's being sent, and the funds being used, we can take a look to see, did they provide any attachments? Maybe there was a quote of some kind along the way for one of the items. These were catalog items in this example, but maybe we had a non-catalog request for which a quote was obtained. Someone could attach that there. Or even at this point, because we have the ability to edit, we could go and select a file that we wanted to add in there that we had the quote for whatever reason. So just because it's there, picked up a packing slip. And you can leave a comment about whatever you'd like the next person that might look at this to know about that attachment. From there, we can take a look at any more memos you like to add to keep on this requisition. You can also take advantage of the notification function within Workday. So in a moment, we're going to go down to these buttons at the bottom, which help us move the requisition in the workflow that we already viewed. But let's say we'd like someone to know about this requisition, but they're not part of the normal workflow. You don't want them to act on it. You're not asking them to approve it or anything along those lines, but you'd just like them to know that it's happened. You can use a wildcard sign there, the @ sign, and the person's name, and type them a message letting them know, hey, I made this order, no need for you to have to, I approved it, whatever you might want to tell them. And what that's going to do for them is up in their notification, they'll get that just kind of nice to know information, but nothing in their inbox that will ask them to act upon it. So now I'll move down to how we're going to move this requisition through the workflow. It came from Lauren Reed to us as the cost center manager. I can approve that, which means I'm saying, yes, I agree with the information that is on this requisition. I'd like it to move on to the next approver. We can send that back, meaning we would like to, kept my note from earlier, we'd like to send this back to the Lauren who requested it, because we'd like her to make some changes. You know, Lauren, this wasn't the item I wanted you to order. Can you please take a look at this other item? Or Lauren, 3 of these are okay, but we needed to actually order 12 of this, whatever you might want them to know. This, as a cost center manager, can be something that might be a very helpful training tool to be able to have a little less work on you future forward. Gives you an opportunity to, right there in the moment, and having examples, show your end users how you would prefer they requisition. Another option at our disposal will be to add approvers. So let's say you think everything looks okay on here, and it's not someone that's necessarily, this is automatically going to go to, but another cost center manager, you want them to look at it. Or an SFO, you wanted them to look at it too, and it might not normally go to them in the workflow, but they're approved to be able to make approvals and edits on a requisition. You can look for them. You can look for them by name, just typing in their name and see if they come up. And if you can't find them by name, you can look for them by role and be able to add them to the approval string and give them comments about, I wanted you to take a look at this because I was unsure of whatever it may be. Other options at our disposal would be to deny the request. Denial is actually something that at some point you will need to use, but I want to stress that deny means dead. And what I mean by that is that no notification will be sent to anyone that you have ended this requisition in its path to approval. So the end user wouldn't have any idea that you had just stopped it. Where send back would give them that notification that it's not approved and it's come back to you, that the workflow has gone backwards here. But deny definitely holds its place. There will still be a record of the transaction, absolutely. It's not like it goes away forever. It just stops making any forward progress and you can't revive it. So deny equals dead.
Jamie, real fast, I just want to go back because there's a question about ad hoc, and I do want to go back to that real quickly. So in Workday, ad approvers is the quote ad hoc capability. Now we are limiting that. So if you click, if you don't mind, Jamie, just one more time, if you click on the ad approvers, the decision that has been made at this point, if you click on this, the little table of contents that right there, okay. So this is the exhaustive list of the type of security roles to which you can ad hoc someone in on this transaction. We had conversations about maybe making this broader, but there's some limitations in Workday. Plus, there was some concern about people veering off from the standard processes. So at this point, this is the list. So typically the people you might ad hoc in here would be your more senior leaders or your SFO, again, if you have concern about the transaction itself. So just kind of want to reiterate.
Yeah,
because we get a lot of questions on that.
Thanks for stopping. Catch another one, stop me along the way. Save for later. I've done some work. I edited a line here and there, added a tag, but I'm not totally done with this thing. It will save my work as the cost center manager where it was. It's not approving it. It's not moving it anywhere in the workflow. It's just saving the work that I've done. Edit work tag defaults is really kind of a non-button in that it just allows you to go up and edit the work tags that we just did. So, oh, did I just accidentally? No, I didn't. It's, oh, I'm looking at it from the requisitioner's point of view now to where I could go in and change those work tags. But you could have done that up in your, in the inbox too. It was just another view. Getting back to it there. And our last option would be to cancel. And what that means is I've done some work on this and I added some tags, whatever I did, but I did it all wrong. Please cancel everything I did and take this back to its default. So you can see what happens next from an approval stage. Let's go ahead and approve this. And once we get there, we get a success message, which is always a good feeling to know we've done it right. And it will show us what's some other things we might consider working on in our inbox, but details and process is really where you'll find the interesting information, that the details of what you just did, but then you can take a look at this process tab. It will show you what's happening next. So where along the path that we looked at earlier is this requisition set to go next? So see if it gave us any more from there. If there's a name in the box that, or a role in the box, that shows you somewhere it's going to go. If you ever see a blank line, so let's say we saw a name here and here, but there was a blank in between there, it means it's going to skip that step. That maybe, let's say there wasn't a grant work tag, so it's not going to make that grants approval step. So that's how we approve a requisition as a cost center manager. This functionality is also available on the mobile application. It has a little bit of a different look to it, just because we have a squish screen, but you have all the same functionality available to you. So there we go. And you slowly work through your inbox and get them knocked out. So what kind of questions do you have for me on how, when would the supplier compliance reviewer enter the workflow? Supplier compliance reviewer. To review that the supplier used is compliant.
Yeah, and it's typically for conflict of interest. If a supplier has been marked as a potential conflict of interest, that would be a role that central procurement holds that it would go to for them to take a look at the actual requisition.
Yeah, probably come up on
non-catalog requests. And probably not used a lot.
Okay. Yeah. But it's been accounted for. It's in there for our review. So good question. Is there any discussion on raising the buyer PL limit to greater than 5? There was discussion. Yes, that. But it was deemed at this time that this is the best choice future forward. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a discussion that comes back up in a couple of years, but I mean, that's the decision for now. So can you sort by work tag? Within my requisition that I'm approving, can I sort by work tag, or do we mean my inbox?
I think inbox. I think that came up when we were on.
I bet you could. I've not tried it. In my editing filters, we want to know if when I create an inbox filter, I want to do it for a business process type and then the task. Yes, you would. It would be down here in these conditions. And if it has this work tag and that work tag.
You definitely can filter by the work tags. I'm not sure about sorting once you're within your work list. Yeah. But you definitely can filter.
You can definitely
go by work tags.
I could say it looks like it here. It'd be a condition that you'd add on to. So yes, good question. I want to remember to put that in the job aid that we make on it. We want to show that one too. So discard that. What we have next? Where is the actual OSU building address listed for us to see or add? So let's go back to our inbox. Let's look at a requisition. And Come on, Workday, catch up with me. Shipping address, building. So this would be the SIMS number of the building that it should be delivered to. The SIM numbers are tied to the Workday delivered to locations. Would that help us identify the building with which it's going to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a way to update all line item work tags at once, or is it always line by line? Okay, a question that I don't know, and we'll find out. Thank you for asking it. I'm like a mass update.
Yeah, I'm writing that down. We'll check on
Okay.
that.
Can you see budget balances related to FDM that is submitted on the request to make sure there is available budget? Would you go to another report first before approving?
Yeah, you could definitely go to, you could open another window here, right? And you could go to a report within Workday to show you the budget balance available. That will be real time. In future state, there's no delays in seeing those reports that would show you your budget versus actuals and your balance. So that would be available in Workday. Unfortunately, I get it, it's not right on that page, but you could get to that within Workday and kind of have it up in another, another window.
Okay. What does external mean? My instinct is that we have internal and external vendors that both future forward, the marketplace will hold catalogs from both internal and select internal and external vendors. I think that's what she might be getting at.
Yeah, we answered that one.
Okay. Building. What about adding in our building services director, IT director? Will those be possibilities?
So for ad hoc, so the your IT director, there is an actual security role called Cost Center Category Approver that is specifically for IT purchases within your college EP unit. And that's assignable at the cost center level. So we do have an actual workflow for IT purchases. For the other purchases at this point in time, I would suggest you would use something like send an email if you really needed an additional approval and attach it, or do the app feature of like Jamie.
Yeah, notification. That's handy because they can get to anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you send this back to the initiator to edit and resubmit without killing it? Yes, you can. Lovely question. I am a fan of send back. It is a wonderful way to teach your users how to better requisition. That you can give them notes on. I needed 4 of these, I need 8 of that, you needed to add this work tag, that work tag, whatever, and this will send it back to their Workday inbox. No more action is happening on this. You did not approve it. They need to go into their Workday inbox and make the suggested edits. Then they too would have that submit button come up for them, hit that to come back to you again. I mean, and you can do that as many times as needed till they get it right. Yeah. Is there a designation on the system for after the fact requests?
I don't think there is, but we can double check that, Eric. I don't know if there is, or if that just would be something you would put in a comment. So I wrote that down. We can follow up on that.
Okay. Sorry if I missed it earlier, but how is approval workflow for marketplace purchases handled if the cost center manager is also the requester?
So the way we've done all this is that when you're filling out your security assignments that we're working on right now, we need to have listed at least 2 people for the cost center manager role for each cost center. And then if I'm a cost center manager and I actually initiate a requisition, the way Workday works is it will drop me off. It will not allow someone who initiates a transaction to also approve it. So then the other person who's assigned to that cost center would approve it.
Okay, good, thanks. Where is the shipping defaulting from? Your HR profile?
Well, the deliver to is coming from your HR profile. And there's actually a worker location that we can talk about in another session because I know of time that we will be asking basically the employee to update with kind of their default. It will bring in your building from your HR data, but your actual location, like your room number or your, what floor you're on, some of those things can be added through a worker location, and that's a self-service aspect within Workday. So we can definitely come back to me. So let's see, should we, what do you think?
The
Should
term
we keep
event
going?
strikes me as new because it is kind of new. All it means is like task. It's
Right.
a happening. It's something you're doing.
Yeah, and that one, the suppliers, maybe we can come back to that. So maybe we can just put that on because I'm just gonna give time. New
Yeah, we can do
supplier
that in the future if you want to
process. Yep, we can.
give you some data on that.
Okay.
Dispatched to vendor immediately after the final approval or dispatched in batches and certain times throughout the day. It's after final approval immediately
Yes.
if we have an electronic relationship with them,
Yep.
which will be vastly
Majority of
increased
those
going
marketplace
forward.
vendors,
Yep. Will initiators have the ability to update the ship to address?
Yeah, I
They-
believe so.
they
because there's-
do,
Yeah.
But there's some logic behind it too. You
Mhm,
can't pick something crazy that doesn't
Mhm.
make sense. So your
Mhm.
deliver to and your ship to do have a connection with one another.
Mhm.
And then as well, I mean, one of the reasons that a cost center manager is asked to look at the address so that if they ad hoc in something that sometimes is okay, like their home address or something, sometimes that might be okay. That it'll allow it if it makes sense for a ship to deliver to relationship, but you guys got to be eyes on looking for anything that might be not business appropriate.
Still having regional. Yes, we will still have regional catalogs for the marketplace so that the ship tos go
Absolutely.
to the regional
Yep.
campuses. Good question.
Yep.
Okay, so we will move on to thanks for all the questions. We took some of those down. So we'll come back. Don't worry, and we can always answer those in follow-up email. So want to make sure we have a little bit of time here to talk about the supplier invoice requests. So these are where we have the supplier set up. It's an approved supplier, but we do not have a purchase order for the actual payment that we need to make. So again, a lot of these are things that you're doing today through payment request or prep payments. So let's go ahead and look at the flow on the next page. So in these cases, the supplier invoice request, very similar in terms of the cost center manager will approve those because there was no PO. So we want to make sure the cost center manager sees those to again review from a budget perspective, to put an eye on, is this appropriate? Should we do a PO for this, or should we have done a PO for this? Making sure there's appropriate usage there. So it will go through the cost center manager, again, business purposes kind of things. And then the next step is those will all go through a business transactions and services step. So they will go to a service center. Same thing, if it has an OSP grant on it, it will go through the grant shared service center. If not, it will go to your university shared service center. Very similar to what we talked about. So hopefully this is good, it's consistent. And if there was a grant program project on the transaction and the college VP unit decided to set up security for someone to approve for those optional steps, it would go to them. And then same thing that we talked about again, that if it's over the 2,500 or the 200 high risk, it would go to the department leader. And if it's for the dean or VP, it would go to Office of Academic Affairs and or the Office of the President for any dollar amount. There's no thresholds there. And then at that point, it would move on to accounts payable to do some processing on those invoices. Just as a note, for in general, there's a different process for utility payment. Probably doesn't affect a lot of you out there, but that's different. That won't go through a cost center manager step or a business transaction services center step. That will go through the energy office. And again, just kind of some notes there on only those optional steps, only if the word tag is used, and only if you've set up security for those steps too, those optional steps. So hopefully that kind of gives you an overview, very similar to the purchase requisition process that we looked at. So maybe we'll go ahead and flow into a demo for that. So we're going to have Jamie, I think we might have time, and actually I think it might be nice for you to see the process in which you go through as a requester to initiate a supplier invoice request. So we'll go ahead and kind of show that, and then if we have time, she can pull up what the approval side would look like too. But that is very similar to what she showed us with the purchase requisition, same kind of functionality.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, thanks. That now we'll take a look at these supplier invoice requests. I need to pay a supplier, and I did not have a purchase order. In Workday in general, there are a number of ways to get to do the same thing. So I'm going to show you two. That you could look at the requesting goods and services application. And from there, we could look to make a request, a payment for a non-PO invoice. And it gives us a little bit of a description of what it is that we're asking to do when we do that. But another way to go about it would be to, in our search bar, we want to look to create, forgot the name of the task for a second, invoice request. That's the name of the actual task that we're attempting to complete. So you can get to the task through an application, or you can search for the name of the task itself. So there, of course, will be job aids available on this that don't think that you have to write down everything I'm saying about to every box. That it allows you to give as much information as you feel comfortable with or have. But the task is also built that, if you have limited information to give, that's okay too. So end users will be able to complete one with the information they have and feel comfortable with. And like I said, job aids will be available, detailing what does this particular cell mean, what are they asking me for here. So going forward, that some information will default for me based on my HR profile. The invoice date is in there for me, as well as my business unit. That it is going to ask me to add a supplier and have one I was using earlier. And based on the supplier that I've chosen, it can default some of that information for me as well. It is going to ask me to add a supplier invoice number, whatever it is that I might have at my disposal, but to be able to do that. It is going to ask me as well to pick a statutory invoice type. And again, although there are a number of these available to fit uses, job aids will be available to help you look at, okay, commission payments, when does that come up? What is the appropriate time to use that? Dues and memberships, what does that exactly mean? When is the appropriate time to use that? For simplicity's sake, I'm going to use an other category for now. We've completed our header line information. Now let's start to go down into our lines. That from there, we're going to want to add some information about at least a description of the item. That even if we don't choose an item itself, let's say that parking came up there. Sure, we're going to pay for some parking. And again, if you felt like you could add more information in other fields, you can. That the end user is allowed to move on without some information as well. It will give you error warnings if you needed to add something that you didn't. It's going to ask us what's the extended amount, which is what is the cost for this line, and then it'll start to populate all the lines, the amounts that you put in up in that control total in the end. As well, we'll want to give some information about our cost center. And based on my cost center, it helped me with some information about balancing unit and additional work tags. So I'm going to go to my fund next and let it know what fund I want to use. And I know there are defaults there, but you still have the opportunity to add other tags as you may want as well. You want to add a project or something along those lines on there, you absolutely have that ability. The internal memo field is going to be a place to give some more information to, say, your cost center manager who's going to review this next. That we are an end user creating the request to pay the invoice. Our cost center manager is going to review that after the fact. So we might want to explain why we don't have a PO. What was the business purpose in purchasing this? Any other information that we can give them that's going to help them be able to approve this more smoothly. On almost every task, you can do that @ notification function, letting other people in your office maybe know. I could tag my friend Wendy. Hey, Wendy, I went ahead and put in the request for this today. You don't have to do it. Just a nice little way of letting people know things if they weren't part of the regularly scheduled process. I can submit, save for later and come back to it, or cancel. In this case, I'll go ahead and submit so that we can take a look at how you, as a cost center manager, would go to approve that request. And there we go. Oh, it's mad at me because I know what it is. There's always something. Attachments. I forgot about the second tab on there. And this is a very handy tool You can attach whatever you can attach the semblance of an invoice that you may have from the supplier. You can attach maybe just a packing slip was all you got. Give them a little something else to go on there to be able to approve your requisition. So, and again, comments about it. This is what came to us on blah, blah, blah day. Whatever might help that cost center manager or others in the flow be able to give you that approval. Now it should be happy with me. There we go. Up next, it's going to my cost center manager, Holly Ross. I can look at the details and processes, details of the transaction I just completed, and I can look at the next steps in the process. Shows me the immediate steps. I have looked at it. It's here it's skipping, I believe, probably the medical center cost center manager, and it went on to my cost center manager. And I know it's skipping because there's no name in that line. I can look at the extended process as well and take a look at, you know, where and how is this going to flow long term until it's really complete. So let's go and take a look at that request that I just submitted and approve it. We're going to start proxy, which means I'm just going to pretend putting on my mask as Holly Ross. And this request will show up to Holly as an actionable item in her inbox. Holly, smartly, is using some filters. She gets a lot of stuff. Look, she's got 167 items in there, but she wants to really be able to zone in on those things that need her immediate request. We don't want to miss a discount on something because we're not paying an invoice fast enough. So let's get it down to just our supplier invoice request. I want to view those quickly. So taking a look at one, I believe that's the one that we just put in. I can act on it right from here in my inbox. I can take a look at what the data that my end user was able to provide. And I too, because I have that ability to still edit, I can add information as I see fit. I can add a spend category if I know where I wanted that to fall. If she didn't give it, look, there's no internal memo. Come on. Yeah. So I'm not approving this one. We're going to send this back. Come on, Wendy Butler, give me a. So whatever reason that we can change our FDM fields. We can add internal memo for them if we wanted to. We could send it back and have them do it. As always, we can add a notification letting other people know about this, even if they weren't an approver. And I have the same options available to me on this approval, on this review, as I did for my requisition. I can add those approvers. I have my categories there again. I can catch up with my workday. I can deny. Deny means dead. Save for later. Cancel everything I've done. That's not canceling the whole request. That's what deny does. So from there, gives you a lot of ability to add and also educate your end user on how you'd like them to complete these requests in the future. So what kind of questions came up as we went along? We got time for a couple? What happens if a requisition is accidentally approved but needs to be edited? Good question. So my first instinctual thought on that is to go to your archive because discard what I was just doing. If you go into your archive, and I wonder if you happen to have any in here. I'm in as a different person now, but in your archive, it had already been approved that there's not a button for it yet, but rescind it. You can rescind a process, which means undo. So that would be the mechanism you'd use, although I can't show it to you right now, I apologize.
Yeah, and I'm not sure to the extent we're going to actually use that because there's some ramifications to that. But no matter what I would probably say to this is if it's on the next step, so say you did it and you're like, oh, I just immediately realized something, and it went to the service center because most, reach out to these ones, these examples we're looking at. At that point, I would do a reach out to whoever it went to in the next step and say, hey, can you please send it back to me?
I use my process list to find who was next and email, Kelly, I shouldn't have done that. Please undo.
Yeah,
good one.
Let's send it back to me. I think that now if it's something where it was a marketplace and basically it's out the door, then at that point we have to talk through about a change order, right? You'd have to do a change order. So if it was to the point that you felt like it needed to be corrected from that. So yeah.
Will there be a list of reasons like what we have now for convenience orders to create non-PO invoice requests?
There will be. We're still working on that with purchasing and with Nathan's team. So we'll work on that. I know I saw when you're in there, Jamie, if you go back to where you were on the supplier invoice request, there is kind of a drop down. So things, Eric, I think Eric had a question, what are some cases? So conference registrations, if you click on that invoice type, conference registrations, dues and memberships, legal services, these kind of activities similar to today where, and in some ways the language below on this is a little deceiving because truly you don't have necessarily, it's not always a good or even a service. Like again, I'm paying for my dues, I'm paying for my membership. Obviously if it's something that is a good that could be purchased off the marketplace or with a PO, we always want a PO. So again, these are typically more these kind of payments that need to be made and very similar today, but we are working with purchasing to kind of finalize that list. Plus there's going to be what's going to go through here versus what's going to go through a miscellaneous payment. So we're still kind of fine tuning that. High risk, so definitely entertainment, business meals, alcohol. Alcohol will actually also go to the SFO for approval. There is things like, and we can definitely, I wrote it down, we can definitely send this out, the list of the categories, but also I believe things like TVs, some electronic things like that too are on that list. It's not a huge list, but stuff like that.
Can you add 2 work types at the same time, such as program and person identifier? Yes, it let us layer on however many we wanted. I've not touched it what the limit is, but I've seen 4 or 5 in there, all layered in. Yep. Can they make an internal memo a required field?
Yeah, it is in some cases.
It is. For university users, it is. On a requisition, it's required. Is it required on the request? I want to say it's required on the request too.
Yeah, we can go back and check on that. I'm not sure why you didn't get an error when you submitted that, but it should be a hard check that there's a.
Did I have gobbledygook in it?
Did you have gobbledygook?
I think I might.
Okay. Yes. We do have unfortunately we can't put the little.
No, I didn't because we came through and she didn't.
We'll go back and check that with the.
These are all test environments we're working in, so.
But unfortunately in Workday we don't have the ability at this point to put like a star by it, which we wish we did. But we do have ability to do like when you save to say kind of like Jamie got that error.
Tell me I didn't put the attachment.
So we do have some ability, and we will do that where we can.
Yeah. Can initiators add information without prompting from the cost center manager? Can initiators make changes to the info? So have they submitted? So if it's already submitted, can they still go back and add? No.
The cost center manager would need to send it back.
Yeah, you can send them an email, say send it back to me, or put this on for me. Is there a reason?
No.
Okay.
Just answer that. Yeah, we wish that was the capability.
Isn't that they're trying to upgrade asterisks?
They're trying. Workday is working on that.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will get that after after go live.
It is. It annoys me too. I may have missed it, but is there a way to flag an invoice that needs to be paid immediately? Then you can set up a filter for that. On my requisition inbox I was in earlier, they had that as a filter set up. I mean, you could take a look at this too. The sorts by due soonest. That should probably help.
So it's like the due date. Is that right? Is that what you're? Or is there like? Because today I think in email I have a thing to say priority, like this is urgent. Okay. Is there anything we can go back?
I haven't seen it on the non-PO. On the requisition, you can mark high priority.
Yes.
But on the non-PO, I did not see that. So are non-PO invoice requests going to be considered exceptions if they don't fall into the convenience order category of today's world? Why wouldn't they require POs to be created like anything else?
Yeah, so we're working with purchasing. There will be a very specific list of what is considered appropriate for a non-PO invoice, because of course we want those limited as much as possible. So definitely more to follow, and I'm sure that will be part of our training and communications as we get a little further along.
Did the invites already go out?
Oh, I apologize. They will be coming out. It was on my calendar, so I assumed Jimmy is keeping us organized here, but they will be going out to you after this. Okay. Thank you, Doris.
So I can answer this, I think. Are payments always done in US dollars, or would the currency be adjusted accordingly? It'll be based on the supplier record that's in this. I chose ABP Corporation, and that was the currency came in as a default. It's going to come from their supplier record, what they transact in. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I believe they may all be USD though. I don't know if we do any multi-currency conversions, so we can check on that.
Okay.
Do you have it sounds like you might have a use case there.
Okay, let me see what that- Is it true that payments for dues/memberships will no longer be paid with a P card when Workday is implemented?
I don't know for sure the answer to that, Donna, so we'll follow up on that. That's part of what we need to kind of go back to, that the big convenience order list, and determine what's still appropriate on a P card, or that should go through a supplier invoice request or not, and a miscellaneous payment. Good question.
Which one are we on now? If a non-PO invoice can be paid with a P card, would the request still be
No.
submitted via supplier invoice request?
It's a different it's a different process. If it's paid through via P card, it actually goes through the expense process. But definitely can follow up on that to make sure we got the right information on appropriate usage there. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So I appreciate all
Yeah, lots of great questions.
good questions here. Okay, so we will follow up on some of those. I think we at least touched on most of the questions, but we'll follow up on any of those that we said we would. Again, thank you for attending today. Feel free to contact us at the above email if you have questions. Make sure you're checking out our website if you haven't been out there recently. And again, you will be getting an invite for the next session in February coming up. That invite should be going out pretty shortly. So again, if you think of anything else afterwards, please feel free to contact us. Thanks, everybody.